Alien girl escaped from monsters and curled up with the human's pet pug, but at dawn, the border between worlds wasn't just a metaphor for Ricky Pierce. It was his backyard. To the east rose the gleaming spires of New Proxima, a metropolis of impossible architecture where the Vexari aliens had established their most ambitious colony on Earth. Holographic advertisements in alien script crawled up the sides of crystalline towers that caught the setting sun like massive prisms, fracturing light into colors humans had no names for. To the west lay the humble settlement of Terravale, where the Aloran refugees, humanoids with skin in various shades of green and eyes too large for their delicate faces, tilled the soil with bare hands and primitive tools. They'd rejected all technology after fleeing their war-torn homeworld, believing it had brought about their near extinction. And right in the middle, a beat-up metal camper that had seen better days, where Ricky lived with his only companion, a flat-faced pug named Brutus. Another thrilling night in no man's land, eh, buddy? Ricky scratched behind Brutus's ear as the dog snorted in agreement. The pug's collar, a sleek black band with pulsing blue lights, was the only piece of advanced tech Ricky allowed himself these days. A gift from an old military buddy, it contained various defensive capabilities that had saved both their asses more than once. Ricky rolled his shoulders, the dark combat suit he wore creaking slightly as the reinforced plates shifted. The glowing blue inserts along the seams provided just enough light for him to move confidently through the twilight. He'd kept the suit from his days in the Earth Defense Force, before the fragile peace treaties had been signed and soldiers like him became obsolete. From his vantage point on the camper's small porch, Ricky watched the sun sink behind the Aloran settlement. Their simple wooden structures were illuminated by oil lamps, creating a warm glow that contrasted sharply with the cold neon of New Proxima behind him. Two alien species that can't stand each other, and here we are, stuck in the middle, he muttered to Brutus. Story of humanity these days. The pug snorted again, then suddenly perked up, his curly tail straightening as much as it could. His ears twitched forward toward the Aloran village. What is it, boy? Ricky followed the dog's gaze, his hand instinctively moving to the pulse pistol holstered at his hip. That's when he saw her, a small figure slipping through a narrow gap in the wooden fence surrounding Terravale. Even from this distance, he could tell she was Aloran by her slight build and the pale green of her skin catching the last rays of sunlight. A child by the looks of it, with long, silvery hair flowing behind her as she darted into the tall grass beyond the village boundary. Damn it, Ricky growled. Doesn't she know what's out there after dark? As if in answer to his question, a bone-chilling howl echoed across the plains. The Ravagers, massive predators resembling hyenas with extra limbs and bioluminescent patches, were beginning their nightly hunt. Stay here, he ordered Brutus, but the pug was already bounding down the porch steps, collar glowing brighter as its defensive systems activated. Brutus! Get back here, Ricky called, but it was too late. The pug was racing toward the Aloran child, who had frozen in terror at the sound of the Ravagers. Cursing under his breath, Ricky grabbed his rifle and sprinted after his dog. The girl had wandered much farther from the village than he'd initially thought. In the gathering darkness, he could make out her small form standing paralyzed in the tall grass as three hulking shapes circled her, their bioluminescent patches pulsing with predatory excitement. Brutus reached her first, his collar emitting a high-pitched whine as it powered up. The nearest Ravager lunged, massive jaws opening to reveal rows of serrated teeth. The pug's collar discharged a pulse of blue energy that sent the creature reeling backward with a pained yelp. Ricky closed the distance just as the other two Ravagers decided to attack simultaneously. He fired 2 quick shots from his rifle, the energy bolts striking one creature in the shoulder. It howled in pain but didn't retreat. The third Ravager leapt at the girl, who finally broke from her paralysis to scream, a sound so piercing it momentarily disoriented even Ricky. He watched in horror as the creature's claws raked across her arm before Brutus's collar discharged again, driving it back. Without hesitation, Ricky scooped the girl up with one arm while firing his rifle with the other, keeping the Ravagers at bay as he retreated toward his camper. Brutus stayed at his heels, the collar continuing to emit pulses that kept the predators from getting too close. The girl was trembling violently in his arms, her large eyes wide with shock. Blood seeped from the deep gash on her arm, staining her simple homespun dress. "It's okay," Ricky said, trying to sound reassuring despite his racing heart. "I've got you." She didn't respond, just stared at him with those enormous eyes. He'd had limited contact with the Alorans since they'd settled here, but he knew they were wary of humans, especially ones like him who carried weapons and wore combat gear. By the time they reached the camper, the Ravagers had given up the chase, slinking back into the darkness to find easier prey. Ricky carried the girl up the steps and into his small living space, setting her gently on the worn couch. "Brutus, guard," he commanded, and the pug took up position by the door, collar still glowing brightly. Ricky retrieved his first aid kit and knelt before the girl. She couldn't have been more than 8 or 9 by human standards, though he wasn't sure how Eloran aging compared. Her silvery hair fell past her shoulders, framing a delicate face with those characteristic large eyes, emerald green with flecks of gold. "I need to clean that wound," he said, gesturing to her arm. "It's going to sting." She remained silent, watching him with an unnerving intensity as he carefully cleaned the deep gash. The Ravager's claws often carried bacteria that could cause nasty infections, so he applied a generous amount of antiseptic before wrapping her arm in a clean bandage. Throughout the process, she never made a sound, though tears silently tracked down her cheeks. When he finished, she finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you." Ricky nodded, packing away the first aid supplies. "You shouldn't be outside the village after dark. The Ravagers hunt at night." "I know," she replied, her accent giving the words a musical quality. "But I wanted to see the stars without the village lights." "Stars aren't worth dying for, kid." Her expression grew solemn. "My people believe our ancestors become stars when they die. I was looking for my father." Ricky felt something twist in his chest. "I'm sorry about your father." She nodded, then reached out tentatively toward Brutus, who had wandered over after determining there was no immediate threat. The pug sniffed her hand before allowing her to pat his head. "What is this creature?" she asked, a hint of wonder in her voice. "He's a dog. A pug specifically. His name is Brutus." "Brutus," she repeated, smiling slightly as the pug licked her fingers. "He saved me." "Yeah, he's got a habit of rushing into danger." Ricky stood, glancing out the window toward the Aloran village. "I should get you back before they notice you're missing." The girl's face fell. "They will be angry." "Probably," Ricky agreed, "but they'll be more worried than angry." She didn't look convinced but didn't argue. Instead, she yawned widely, the events of the evening clearly catching up with her. "I'm tired," she murmured, her eyelids drooping. Ricky sighed. "Look, it's dangerous to go back now. The Ravagers are still out there. You can sleep here tonight, and I'll take you home in the morning." She nodded gratefully, already curling up on the couch. Ricky grabbed a spare blanket from his sleeping area, but by the time he returned, she had moved to Brutus's plush dog bed in the corner. The pug had followed her and was now curled against her side, his stocky body rising and falling with each breath. The sight gave Ricky pause. It had been a long time since he'd had anyone but Brutus in his home. After the war, after losing his squad, he'd chosen isolation, positioning himself literally between 2 alien worlds while belonging to neither. Quietly, he draped the blanket over the girl and the pug, careful not to wake either of them. As he straightened, he noticed how peaceful she looked in sleep, the fear and pain erased from her features. "What the hell am I doing?" he muttered to himself as he settled into a chair by the window, rifle across his lap. He'd take her back at first light, and that would be the end of it. No need to get involved any further. But as he watched the stars through the window, the same stars the girl had risked her life to see, Ricky couldn't shake the feeling that his carefully constructed solitude was about to be shattered. The first rays of morning light filtered through the camper's small window, casting a warm glow over the sleeping Eloran child and Brutus. Ricky had dozed off in his chair sometime during the night, his rifle still balanced across his lap. He woke with a start, his soldier's instincts immediately alert to a change in his surroundings. Outside, the sound of approaching footsteps, many of them, broke the dawn silence. "Shit," Ricky muttered, moving quickly to the window. What he saw made his stomach drop. A group of Aloran farmers was marching toward his camper, their normally peaceful faces contorted with anger. They carried farming implements, scythes, pitchforks, and hoes, gripped like weapons. At their head strode a tall male Aloran with deep emerald skin and silver streaks in his otherwise black hair. The village elder, if Ricky remembered correctly. "Brutus," Ricky called softly. The pug lifted his head, blinking sleepily. Defense mode. The collar around Brutus's neck brightened, the blue glow intensifying as its systems powered up. The dog carefully extracted himself from beside the still sleeping girl and trotted to Ricky's side. Ricky considered his options. He could barricade the door, but that would only escalate the situation. These weren't Ravagers. They were people worried about a child. Worried people with sharp farming tools, but people nonetheless. With a resigned sigh, he set his rifle aside and stepped onto the porch, closing the door behind him to let the girl sleep a little longer. Brutus followed, taking position at his feet, the collar pulsing steadily. The Alorans stopped about 10 paces from the camper, their makeshift weapons raised. The elder stepped forward, his large eyes narrowed to slits. "Human," he said, his voice deep and resonant despite his slight frame. "You have taken one of our children?" Ricky kept his hands visible at his sides. "I didn't take her. I saved her from Ravagers last night. She was outside your village after dark." A murmur ran through the group. The elder raised a hand to silence them. "You expect us to believe a human would help an Aloran child?" His tone dripped with skepticism. "We know how humans think. You use others for your own gain." Ricky felt his temper flare, but kept his voice even. "Look, I don't give a damn what you think about humans. The kid was being hunted by Ravagers. My dog and I drove them off, but she was hurt. It was too dangerous to bring her back at night, so she slept here. That's it." The elder's expression didn't soften. "Where is she now?" "Asleep inside. She's exhausted and has a nasty wound on her arm that needs proper care." "We will take her now," the elder declared, gesturing for two of his companions to approach the camper. Ricky stepped to block their path. "Hold on. She's not a package to be handed off. She's been through a traumatic experience." The elder's face darkened. "You dare to lecture us on how to care for our own children? Step aside, human." Before Ricky could respond, the camper door creaked open behind him. The Aloran girl stood there, rubbing sleep from her eyes with her uninjured arm. When she saw the gathering, her eyes widened in alarm. "Elder Thorin," she said, her voice small but clear. The Elder Thorin fixed her with a stern gaze. "Lyran, you have broken our most sacred law by leaving the village after sunset. You have brought shame to your mother and endangered us all by involving a human." The girl, Lyran, stepped forward, her chin raised despite her obvious fear. "The human saved me. He and his creature protected me from the night beasts when I was foolish enough to wander too far." Thoran's expression didn't change. "Come here, child." Lyran hesitated, glancing up at Ricky with those enormous eyes. Something passed between them, a moment of understanding, perhaps even trust. Then she moved past him and down the steps. As she reached the elder, Brutus suddenly darted forward, positioning himself between Lyran and the Alorans. His collar pulsed brightly as he emitted a low, warning growl. "Call off your beast," Thoran demanded, raising his staff. "Brutus, stand down," Ricky ordered, though part of him appreciated the pug's protective instinct. Reluctantly, Brutus backed up, still watching the Alorans warily. Lyran knelt and quickly scratched behind Brutus's ear before allowing herself to be led away by the elder. As the group turned to leave, she looked back over her shoulder at Ricky, her expression a mixture of gratitude and regret. "Thank you," she mouthed silently. Ricky nodded, a strange heaviness settling in his chest as he watched the Alorans march back toward their village, Lyran's small form almost lost among them. No words of thanks from the adults, not even an acknowledgement that he'd saved one of their children. "You're welcome," he muttered to no one in particular. As the Alorans disappeared into their village, Ricky noticed movement in his peripheral vision. Turning, he saw a sleek silver vehicle hovering at the edge of his property, the distinctive angular design marking it as Vexari technology. Two tall, slender figures stood beside it, their iridescent skin catching the morning light as they observed the scene through multifaceted eyes. Great, just what he needed. The Vexari Surveillance Corps had undoubtedly monitored the entire confrontation. "Show's over," Ricky called out to them, making a dismissive gesture. The Vexari made no response, but their vehicle hummed to life and glided away toward the gleaming city in the distance. Ricky sighed heavily, looking down at Brutus. "Well, buddy, so much for staying out of alien politics." The pug snorted in what seemed like agreement, his collar dimming as the defensive systems powered down. Back inside the camper, Ricky noticed Lyran had neatly folded the blanket he'd given her and placed it on Brutus's bed. Beside it lay a small carved wooden figure, a crude but recognizable representation of a pug. A parting gift, it seemed. He picked it up, turning it over in his calloused hands. Despite everything, he found himself smiling. "Looks like we made an impression, Brutus." The pug wagged his curly tail, then trotted to his food bowl and looked up expectantly. Yeah, breakfast time. Then we go back to minding our own business." But as Ricky prepared Brutus's food, he couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end of his interaction with the Allorans, or with Lyran. Something told him their paths would cross again, and soon. The day passed with an unusual stillness that made Ricky restless. By late afternoon, he'd cleaned his weapons twice, reorganized his supplies, and even given Brutus a bath, much to the pug's vocal displeasure. "You smell like wet dog," Ricky told him as Brutus shook vigorously, spraying water in all directions. The pug gave him a look that clearly said, "What did you expect?" With nothing left to occupy his hands, Ricky found his thoughts drifting back to Lyran and the wooden pug carving she'd left behind. He'd placed it on his small shelf next to the only photo he kept. His old EDF squad, all of them grinning in their combat gear, blissfully unaware that within weeks, half of them would be dead. A movement outside caught his attention. Through the window, he spotted a sleek Vexari hover vehicle approaching his camper. Unlike the surveillance craft from that morning, this one was larger, with the distinctive markings of an official delegation. "Visitors twice in one day," Ricky muttered. "Must be a record." He strapped on his sidearm, not that it would do much good against Vexari tech if things went south, and stepped onto the porch with Brutus at his heels. The vehicle settled silently on the ground, and two Vexari emerged. They were tall and slender, with iridescent skin that shifted colors with each movement. Their faces were angular, with multifaceted eyes that reminded Ricky of insect eyes, though their expressions were undeniably intelligent and calculating. The taller one stepped forward. "Ricky Pierce, former Earth Defense Force combat specialist," he said, his voice a strange melodic hum. "I am Administrator Terran of the Vexari Expansion Initiative." Ricky crossed his arms. "Didn't know I was important enough for the Expansion Initiative to know my name." "We make it our business to know all potential assets in our operational zones," Terran replied smoothly. "May we speak inside?" "I prefer the fresh air," Ricky said. "What do you want?" Terran's skin rippled with blue patterns. Amusement, if Ricky remembered his Vexari emotional displays correctly. Direct, as humans often are. "Very well." Terran gestured to his companion, who projected a holographic map of the area. "We have been monitoring the Alloran settlement for some time. Their agricultural practices have made the soil in this region exceptionally fertile, a rarity on this planet." Ricky's eyes narrowed. "And you want their land?" "We wish to establish a mutually beneficial arrangement," Terran corrected. "The Allorans are vulnerable to predators and environmental hazards. We could provide protection." "In exchange for their farmland," Ricky finished. "In exchange for access to a portion of their agricultural output," Terran said, "they would retain their settlement and cultural practices." Ricky had heard similar promises before, on Earth and other colonies. They never ended well for the less technologically advanced party. "And you're telling me this because—" "You occupy a unique position between our societies," Terran said. "The Allorans distrust us, but they might listen to you. After your heroic rescue of their child, you have established a connection." Ricky almost laughed. "They practically dragged that girl away from me this morning. I wouldn't call that a connection. Nevertheless, we would compensate you generously for facilitating discussions." Before Ricky could respond, Brutus suddenly growled, his attention fixed not on the Vexari, but toward the borderlands beyond Ricky's property. Ricky followed the pug's gaze and spotted a lone figure hurrying across the open ground between the Eloran village and his camper. Even at this distance, he recognized the distinctive gait and slender form of an Eloran adult. "Looks like I'm popular today," Ricky said. "You should go. I doubt your presence will help whatever this is about." Terran's skin flashed with patterns of irritation, but he nodded. "Consider our proposal, Ricky Pierce. We will return for your answer soon." As the Vexari returned to their vehicle, Ricky watched the approaching Eloran with growing concern. The figure moved with urgency, occasionally glancing back toward the village as if afraid of being followed. The hover vehicle lifted off just as the Elloran reached the edge of Ricky's property. It was a female, her green skin a shade lighter than most he'd seen, with silver-white hair pulled back in a practical braid. She wore the simple homespun clothing typical of the Ellorans, but something about her bearing suggested she wasn't a typical farmer. When she saw the departing Vexari craft, she hesitated, her large eyes widening with alarm. "They're gone!" Ricky called out. "What do you want?" She approached cautiously, her gaze darting between Ricky and Brutus. The pug, for his part, seemed more curious than concerned, his tail wagging slightly. "You are the human who saved my daughter," she said, her voice melodic but strained with worry. Ricky straightened. "You're Lyran's mother." She nodded. "I am Nara. I come to you in desperation, human. Lyran is ill. The wound from the Ravager. It festers. Our healers try, but..." She trailed off, her large eyes glistening with unshed tears. "The elders placed her in isolation as punishment for leaving the village," she continued. "I am not permitted to see her until the ritual cleansing is complete." But I heard her cries of pain. The guards would not listen. Ricky felt a surge of anger. "So they're just letting her suffer?" "It is our way," Nara said, though her tone suggested she didn't fully believe in the tradition herself. "But I cannot stand by while my child suffers." "You have medicines, yes? Things that might help?" "I have antibiotics, yes," Ricky confirmed. "Ravager wounds often get infected. But why come to me? Won't you be punished for seeking help from a human?" Nara lifted her chin. "I was a healer before we rejected technology. I know when ancient remedies are not enough. As for punishment..." She shrugged, a surprisingly human gesture. "My daughter's life is worth more." Ricky studied her for a moment. There was something she wasn't telling him, but her concern for Lyran seemed genuine. "Where is she being held?" he asked. "In the purification hut at the edge of the village," Nara replied. "There are guards, but they change at dusk. There is a brief window when..." She stopped suddenly, her attention drawn to something behind Ricky. He turned to see Brutus had wandered to the edge of his property, his nose to the ground, collar glowing brighter than usual. "Brutus?" Ricky called. "What is it, boy?" The pug didn't respond, continuing to sniff intently at something in the tall grass. With a sense of foreboding, Ricky approached, Nara following hesitantly behind him. What Brutus had found made Ricky's blood run cold. A dead Ravager lay partially hidden in the grass, its massive body unnaturally still. But it wasn't the creature's presence that disturbed him. It was the modifications visible on its body. Metal implants protruded from its skull and spine, and a surgical scar ran the length of its torso. "What is this abomination?" Nara whispered, horror evident in her voice. Ricky knelt beside the creature, careful not to touch it. "Someone's been experimenting on them," he said grimly, "and I'd bet my last credit it's your Vexari neighbors." Nara's eyes widened. "The Vexari? But why would they?" "I think I know why," Ricky interrupted, the pieces falling into place. "They want your land. What better way to drive you out than to make the area too dangerous to live in?" He stood, his decision made. "I'll help you get medicine to Lyran. But this," he gestured to the modified Ravager, "this is bigger than just your daughter. If the Vexari are creating bioweapons, both our communities are at risk." Nara looked at him with a mixture of gratitude and apprehension. "Why would you help us? Your kind has no stake in our survival." Ricky thought of Lyran's small wooden carving, of her sleeping peacefully next to Brutus. "Let's just say I've picked a side," he replied, "and it's not with anyone who experiments on living creatures to steal land." As they headed back to the camper to gather supplies, Ricky couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. Glancing toward the gleaming spires of New Proxima, he wondered just how much the Vexari already knew about his decision. Dusk painted the sky in hues of amber and violet as Ricky and Nara approached the Elloran village. Ricky had traded his usual combat suit for darker clothing to blend with the shadows, though he kept his sidearm holstered at his hip. Brutus trotted beside them, his collar dimmed to its lowest setting. "The purification hut is there," Nara whispered, pointing to a small structure at the village's edge. "2 guards, as expected." Ricky nodded, studying the simple wooden building. "I'll create a distraction. You get inside with the medicine." He handed her a small pack containing antibiotics and pain relievers. Nara's fingers brushed against his as she took it, and he noticed how her skin was cooler than a human's, with a subtle texture like fine suede. "You risk much for strangers," she said, her large eyes searching his face. "Why?" Ricky shrugged. "Let's just say I've seen what happens when people with power decide others are expendable." Before Nara could respond, a soft chime emanated from Ricky's pocket. He pulled out his communicator, surprised to see an encrypted message from an unknown sender. "What is it?" Nara asked, tension evident in her voice. "Someone wants to meet," Ricky replied, scanning the message. "A Vexari scientist. Says she has information about the modified Ravagers." Nara's expression hardened. "A trap." "Maybe," Ricky conceded, "but the location is nearby and the timing's convenient." Too convenient. He made a quick decision. Change of plan. "I'll still create a distraction, but Brutus will go with you. His collar can detect any tracking devices on Lyran." Nara looked skeptical. "Your creature will follow my commands?" "His name is Brutus," Ricky corrected gently. "And yes, he's smarter than he looks." He knelt beside the pug. "Guard her, buddy. Help her find Lyran." Brutus snorted in acknowledgement, then moved to Nara's side, looking up at her expectantly. "The guards change in 5 minutes," Nara said. "Be careful, human." "Ricky," he said. "My name is Ricky." A faint smile curved her lips. "Be careful, Ricky." He watched them slip away toward the village perimeter before heading to the meeting point, a small grove of twisted trees halfway between his camper and the Aloran settlement. The grove was eerily silent when he arrived, no sign of his mysterious contact. Ricky positioned himself with his back to a tree, hand resting on his sidearm. "I know you're there," he called out. "Show yourself." A slender figure emerged from behind a cluster of boulders. The Vexari female was younger than Administrator Terran, her iridescent skin showing patterns of anxiety as she approached. "You came alone," she said, her melodic voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," Ricky replied. "Who are you and what do you want?" "I am Kayla, research assistant in the Biological Adaptation Division." Her multifaceted eyes darted nervously around the grove. "What I am doing is considered treason among my people." "Which is what exactly?" "Warning you," she produced a small data device. "The Ravager modifications are only the beginning. Administrator Terran plans to release a bioengineered pathogen into the Aloran water supply. It will not kill them but will cause severe illness, enough to force them to abandon their settlement." Ricky's jaw tightened. "When?" "Tomorrow at dawn. The delivery system is already in place." Kayla handed him the device. "This contains the formula for a neutralizing agent. I cannot stop the release, but this could counteract the effects." "Why help us? What do you get out of this?" Kayla's skin rippled with patterns Ricky couldn't interpret. "Not all Vexari support the Expansion Initiative's methods. Some of us believe coexistence is possible." She paused. "And I need passage off-planet. My actions tonight ensure I cannot return to New Proxima." A sudden commotion from the direction of the Eloran village caught their attention. Shouts and the glow of torches, moving in patterns that suggested something more organized than a simple guard change. "That's not good," Ricky muttered. His communicator chimed again, a signal from Brutus's collar. The pug was alerting him to danger. "I need to go," he told Kella. "If you're telling the truth, find my camper and wait there." He didn't wait for her response, already sprinting toward the village, cursing under his breath. The plan had clearly gone sideways. As he approached, he saw a crowd gathering in the village center. Aloran voices rose in anger and confusion. Ricky slowed, sticking to the shadows as he circled toward the purification hut. He found Nara and Brutus crouched behind a storage shed, the pug's collar pulsing with alert signals. "What happened?" he whispered. "Elder Thorin was waiting inside the hut," Nara explained, her voice tight with tension. "He knew I would come for Lyran." Ricky tensed. "Did he hurt you?" "No," she said, surprising him. "He wanted to speak with us privately. He has suspected the Vexari for months. Crops failing, water sources mysteriously drying up. Too many natural disasters." "He's right to be suspicious," Ricky said, quickly explaining what Kayla had told him about the planned water contamination. Nara's eyes widened. "The ceremonial blessing of the spring is at dawn tomorrow. The entire village will drink from it." Perfect timing for a mass poisoning, Ricky growled. Where's Lyran now? With Thorin. He moved her to his dwelling when he realized her wound was not healing properly. Nara's expression softened slightly. He may enforce our traditions strictly, but he does not wish harm on our children. Brutus suddenly growled, his attention fixed on something behind them. Ricky turned to see Elder Thorin approaching, supporting a weak but conscious Lyran. Human, Thorin acknowledged Ricky with a curt nod. It seems we have common enemies. So it seems, Ricky agreed cautiously. Lyran's face brightened when she saw Ricky and Brutus. You came back, she said, her voice faint but clear. I did, Ricky replied, surprised by the wave of protectiveness he felt. How's the arm? It burns, she admitted, but Mother's medicine helps. Thoran's stern expression didn't change, but his next words surprised Ricky. The Vexari have surrounded our village. They claim a dangerous predator infestation requires our immediate evacuation. Convenient timing, Ricky said grimly. Indeed. Thoran studied Ricky with those large alien eyes. You have knowledge of their true intentions? Ricky nodded, showing him Kayla's data device, and possibly a way to counter their attack if we can trust this information. Brutus suddenly stiffened, his collar flashing urgent warnings. The pug moved to Lyran's side, sniffing intently at her bandaged arm. What is it, boy? Ricky knelt beside them. Brutus pawed gently at the bandage. Understanding dawned on Ricky as he carefully unwrapped the wound. Embedded in the inflamed flesh was a tiny metallic object, pulsing with a faint light. A tracking implant, he said, anger rising in his chest. She wasn't randomly attacked. The Ravager was sent specifically for her. Nara gasped, instinctively pulling Lyran closer. Why target a child? Because children explore, Ricky realized. They wander beyond boundaries, perfect unwitting carriers to bring tracking devices into your village. Thoran's face darkened with rage. They used our children as pawns. And now they've surrounded us, Ricky said, mind racing through tactical options. We need to move quickly. Thorin, gather your most trusted people. Nara, can you synthesize this neutralizing agent? He held up Kayla's device. With the right materials, yes, she replied. I maintained some equipment in secret after our rejection of technology. Good. Ricky turned to Thoran. We need to evacuate your people to my camper. It's defensible, and I have weapons. Abandon our village? Thoran looked aghast. Temporarily, Ricky assured him. But first, we need to remove this tracker from Lyran and plant it elsewhere to buy us time. As they quickly formulated their plan, Ricky realized how seamlessly he'd slipped back into his role as a tactical commander. The difference was, this time he wasn't fighting for some distant political cause. He was fighting for people he'd come to care about in an astonishingly short time. Lyran reached out and touched his hand, her small green fingers cool against his skin. I knew you would help us, she said simply. Ricky squeezed her hand gently. That's what humans do, kid. We help. And in that moment, surrounded by aliens in a conflict not of his making, Ricky felt more human than he had in years. We'll need a diversion, Ricky said, carefully extracting the tracking device from Lyran's wound. The girl winced but remained brave, her large eyes fixed on Brutus for comfort. Something to keep the Vexari focused away from our evacuation route. Thoran, who had gathered his most trusted advisors in his dwelling, nodded grimly. Our warriors are few, but they will fight. No, Ricky countered. Fighting isn't the answer here. We're outnumbered and outgunned. He held up the tiny tracker. But this gives us an advantage they don't know we have. Nara, who had been examining Kayla's data device, looked up. The neutralizing agent requires components I don't have here. I need access to my hidden equipment near your camper. Ricky nodded. Then that settles it. We evacuate to my place, synthesize the countermeasure, and figure out our next move. Abandon generations of tradition? One of the elders protested. Your ancestors would want you alive, Ricky interrupted. This isn't surrender. It's tactical repositioning. Thoran raised his hand for silence. The human speaks wisdom. We cannot defend against weapons we do not understand. He turned to Ricky. How do we proceed? We split into 3 groups, Ricky explained. I'll take the tracker and plant it far from our escape route. Thorin, You'll lead the main group of villagers through the eastern ravine toward my camper. Nara, you take Lyran, Brutus, and a small group through the western approach. And what of the Vexari scientist? Thorin asked, suspicion evident in his tone. If she's at my camper as planned, she could be our best source of intelligence, Ricky replied. If she's betrayed us, he left the implication hanging. As they finalized the details, Ricky found himself standing beside Nara, who was preparing a fresh bandage for Lyran's arm. Your people are taking this better than I expected, he observed quietly. Nara's hands worked with practiced efficiency. We may reject technology, but we are not fools. Survival sometimes requires adaptation. She glanced up at him, her large eyes reflecting the lamplight. Your willingness to help us, it is unexpected. Why? Because I'm human? Because you had no obligation to involve yourself in our troubles, she clarified. You could have remained neutral, safe in your position between worlds. Ricky watched as she finished bandaging Lyran's arm. Neutrality is just another word for letting bullies win. A hint of a smile curved Nara's lips. A very human perspective. Is that a compliment or an observation? He asked, returning her smile. Perhaps both, she replied, her voice softening. For a moment, something passed between them, a connection that transcended their different species. The moment was broken by Thorin's approach. It is time. Outside, the night had deepened, the twin moons of the planet casting an eerie glow over the village. Vexari hover vehicles maintained their perimeter, searchlights occasionally sweeping across the settlement's edge. Ricky knelt beside Lyran. Stay close to your mother and Brutus. That collar of his will warn you of danger. Lyran nodded solemnly, then surprised him by throwing her arms around his neck in a quick hug. Be careful, she whispered. Always am, kid, he replied, feeling a tightness in his chest as she pulled away. With final instructions exchanged, the group separated. Ricky took the tracker and headed south, away from both planned evacuation routes. His mission was simple but dangerous. Plant the device far enough away to draw Vexari attention, then circle back to rendezvous with Nara's group. He moved silently through the darkness, his years of military training returning with fluid ease. The weight of his sidearm against his hip was reassuring, though he hoped he wouldn't need to use it. As he approached the southern boundary, he spotted what he was looking for. A wild ravager, smaller than the modified ones, but still a formidable predator. Using a small dart gun from his kit, he tranquilized the creature, then carefully attached the tracker to its hide. Sorry, buddy, he muttered as the ravager slumbered. You're about to become very popular. With the tracker planted, Ricky began his circuitous route back toward his camper. He'd covered about half the distance when a familiar sound made him freeze. The hum of a Vexari hover vehicle, much closer than it should have been. Ducking behind a cluster of rocks, he watched as the sleek craft descended in a small clearing ahead. The hatch opened and a tall figure emerged. Administrator Terran, flanked by 2 security officers and something that made Ricky's blood run cold. A modified Ravager, larger than any he'd seen, with extensive cybernetic implants visible along its spine and head. The tracker shows movement south, one of the officers reported, but our sensors detected unauthorized activity in this sector as well. Terran's iridescent skin rippled with patterns of irritation. Find whatever it is. The operation proceeds at dawn regardless of these complications. Ricky remained motionless, barely breathing as one of the officers scanned the area. The modified Ravager sniffed the air, its augmented senses clearly picking up something the technology missed. Sir, the officer said suddenly, we're receiving an alert from the perimeter team. Multiple Elorans are attempting to leave the village. Terran's skin flashed with what Ricky recognized as satisfaction. So they flee as expected. Deploy the containment units. I want them herded toward the spring. They must be present for the morning ceremony. And the human? Pierce. A complication I should have eliminated long ago, Terran replied coldly. He interfered with our operations on Helios 7, and now here. Find him. Ricky's mind raced. Helios 7, the mining colony where his EDF squad had prevented a corporate takeover that would have displaced thousands of indigenous inhabitants. He hadn't known Vexari interests were behind that operation. This time, Terran continued, I will personally ensure he understands the cost of opposing the expansion initiative. As the Vexari returned to their vehicle, Ricky realized the stakes had just risen dramatically. This wasn't just about land. It was about a systematic pattern of exploitation that spanned multiple worlds. And now it was personal. Once the craft departed, Ricky abandoned stealth for speed, racing toward his camper. He had to warn the others that their plan had been compromised. When he finally reached the edge of his property, he was met with chaos. Vexari security forces had surrounded his camper, where a group of Elorans huddled on his porch. Nara stood protectively in front of Lyran, while Brutus growled at the Vexari, his collar pulsing with defensive energy. Near the camper's entrance, Kayla was being restrained by two officers, her skin displaying patterns of distress and defiance. The traitor attempted to access restricted files, one officer reported to the commander. She was transmitting data when we intercepted her. Ricky crouched behind a boulder, assessing the situation. The main group of Alorans with Thorin was nowhere in sight. Either they'd been captured elsewhere or had changed course when they realized the camper was compromised. He needed a plan, and fast. Direct confrontation would be suicide against so many armed Vexari, but as he watched Nara standing defiantly before the aliens who threatened her people, something stirred within him, a determination he hadn't felt since his days in the EDF. These people, aliens though they might be, had shown more humanity than the supposedly advanced Vexari. Lyran's innocent trust, Nara's quiet strength, even Thorin's grudging respect, they deserved better than to become casualties in some corporate land grab. Ricky checked his weapons and took a deep breath. He might be just one human against an alien corporation with advanced technology and modified predators at their disposal. But if there was one thing humans had proven throughout history, it was that they should never be underestimated when fighting for what's right. With renewed purpose, he began to circle the perimeter, looking for an opening. Dawn was approaching, and with it, the Vexari's planned attack on the Aloran water supply. He had to act now. As he moved, he spotted something unexpected. Elder Thorin and his group approaching stealthily from the west. They hadn't been captured after all, and they weren't alone. Among them was a familiar face that made Ricky smile grimly. Perhaps the odds weren't quite as impossible as they seemed. The first hints of dawn painted the eastern sky as Ricky crept toward Thorin's group. His surprise turned to astonishment when he saw who accompanied the Aloran Elder, a tall human woman in the distinctive blue uniform of the Interstellar Diplomatic Corps. "Commander Pierce," she greeted him with a crisp nod. "Captain Chloe Spencer, IDC, your dog's emergency beacon was quite insistent." Ricky glanced down at Brutus across the clearing, the pug's collar still pulsing with defensive energy. "Emergency beacon? That crafty little—" "Your former commanding officer mentioned you might need backup someday," Spencer explained. "He had the collar programmed to activate if it detected certain stress patterns in your voice. Been transmitting for hours." Ricky shook his head, a mixture of exasperation and gratitude washing over him. Colonel Jameson always was a paranoid bastard. "With good reason, it seems." Spencer gestured toward the surrounded camper. "I've got a diplomatic shuttle with a small security team on approach. ETA 5 minutes. But I need to understand exactly what we're dealing with." As Ricky quickly briefed her on the situation, Thoran listened intently, his large eyes narrowing at the mention of the planned water contamination. "The spring ceremony cannot be delayed," the elder said. "It is central to our beliefs." "And exactly what Terran is counting on," Ricky replied. "We need to secure that spring before dawn fully breaks." Spencer nodded. "My team can handle the Vexari at your camper, but we'll need a distraction to draw forces away from the spring." "I can provide that," came a melodic voice from behind them. A group of Vexari emerged from the shadows, their skin patterns subdued to avoid detection. At their head was a male with distinctive gold markings along his neck. Counselor Marin, Kayla had mentioned him, a high-ranking member of the Vexari governance who opposed Terran's methods. "Administrator Terran has exceeded his authority," Marin stated. "The expansion initiative was chartered to establish peaceful settlements, not engage in biological warfare against indigenous populations." "You knew what he was doing?" Ricky challenged. "We suspected," Marin admitted, "but lacked proof until Kayla contacted us. We have been gathering evidence, but Terran accelerated his timeline." Spencer stepped forward. "As an official representative of Earth, I can assure you that any evidence of illegal activities will be presented to the Galactic Council." "Politics can wait," Ricky interrupted. "Right now, we need to save those people at my camper and stop Terran from poisoning the spring." They quickly formulated a plan. Marin's Vexari would create a diversion at the eastern perimeter, drawing attention away from both the camper and the spring. Spencer's team would secure the camper and free the hostages, while Ricky, Thorin, and a small group would head directly for the spring to intercept Terran. As they prepared to move out, Ricky pulled Spencer aside. "If this goes sideways—" "It won't," she assured him. "But if it does, I've already transmitted preliminary evidence to headquarters. The Vexari expansion initiative won't escape scrutiny this time." Ricky nodded gratefully, then turned to Thorin. "Ready?" The elder's face was set with determination. "For my people, yes." They moved swiftly through the pre-dawn light, using the terrain for cover. In the distance, Ricky heard the first sounds of Marin's diversion, alarms blaring and the distinctive hum of Vexari vehicles redirecting. As they approached the sacred spring, a small, clear pool nestled in a grove of twisted trees, Ricky spotted Terran and two security officers setting up a device at the water's edge. The modified Ravager prowled nearby, its cybernetic implants glowing ominously. "We're too late to stop them from deploying," Ricky whispered. "We need to neutralize that device before the ceremony begins." Thorin pointed to a path leading to the spring. "The procession will arrive from that direction when the sun crests the ridge." Ricky checked his weapon. "I'll handle Terran and his guards." "Can your people keep that Ravager busy?" Before Thorin could answer, a familiar bark echoed through the grove. Brutus came bounding toward them, having somehow escaped the camper. Behind him ran Lyran, with Nara and Kella close behind. "What the—" Ricky began, but was cut off by the Ravager's howl as it detected the newcomers. The creature lunged toward Lyran, but Brutus intercepted it, his collar discharging a powerful pulse that staggered the larger predator. The security officers turned toward the commotion, giving Ricky his opening. He burst from cover, firing two precise shots that disabled the officers' weapons. Terran spun around, his skin flashing with patterns of rage when he recognized Ricky. "You!" the administrator hissed, "always interfering in matters beyond your understanding." "I understand plenty," Ricky replied, keeping his weapon trained on Terran. "Like how corporations using biological weapons against civilians is illegal in every civilized system." Terran's multifaceted eyes narrowed. "Progress requires sacrifice. The Alorans are an evolutionary dead end, clinging to primitive ways while sitting on valuable resources." "That's not your decision to make," Ricky said, advancing steadily. Meanwhile, Kayla had reached the device at the spring's edge and was frantically working to disable it. "It's already activated," she called out. "The contaminant is releasing into the water." Nara rushed to her side, pulling a small vial from her robes, the neutralizing agent they'd synthesized. "Will this be enough?" "If we can distribute it evenly," Kayla replied. Behind them, the Ravager had cornered Brutus and Lyran against a large boulder. The pug stood protectively in front of the girl, his collar nearly depleted from multiple defensive discharges. Seeing Lyran in danger, Terran smiled coldly. "Your weakness, Pierce. Always protecting the helpless instead of embracing progress." In a swift motion, Terran produced a control device and activated it. The Ravager howled in pain as its implants pulsed with increased power. It turned its attention fully on Lyran, ignoring Brutus's weakening defenses. "Stop this!" Ricky demanded, his finger tightening on the trigger. "Or what? You'll kill me? Prove you're the barbarian I know humans to be?" Terran taunted. A tense moment passed as Ricky weighed his options. Then unexpectedly, he lowered his weapon. "No," he said calmly. "I won't kill you. That's the difference between us. I don't sacrifice others for my goals." In that moment of distraction, Thorin launched himself at Terran, knocking the control device from his hand. It skittered across the ground, coming to rest at Lyran's feet. The girl, showing remarkable courage, grabbed the device and smashed it against the boulder. The Ravager immediately stopped its advance, shaking its massive head as if clearing it. "No!" Terran cried, breaking free from Thorin and lunging toward a secondary control on his wrist. Ricky tackled him, and they both tumbled into the spring with a splash. The sacred water swirled around them as they struggled, Terran's iridescent skin flashing with patterns of hatred and fear. "It's over, Terran," Ricky said, pinning the administrator against the spring's rocky edge. "Your operation, your career, all of it." Above them, the first rays of true dawn broke over the ridge, illuminating the spring in golden light. The Aloran procession had arrived at the grove's edge, led by the village's oldest members, who stopped in shock at the scene before them. In the spring, something unexpected happened. The water around Ricky and Taryn began to glow, not with contamination, but with the neutralizing agent that had been added just in time. The luminescence spread throughout the pool, creating a spectacular display that left even the Alorans in awe. Spencer arrived with her security team, quickly taking Taryn into custody. Administrator Taryn, you're being detained pending investigation into violations of the Galactic Non-Interference Statutes and illegal bioweapon deployment. As Ricky climbed out of the spring, soaking wet but victorious, he found Nara waiting at the edge, her hand extended to help him up. "You are full of surprises, human," she said, a warm smile lighting her face. "Just doing what needed to be done," he replied, accepting her hand. The touch lingered longer than necessary, neither of them quite willing to let go. Lyran rushed over, Brutus trotting happily at her heels. "You saved our water!" "And Brutus saved me again." Ricky knelt to ruffle the pug's damp fur. He's got a talent for being in the right place at the wrong time. Counselor Marin approached, his skin displaying patterns of formal respect. "Commander Pierce, the Vexari Governance Council extends its gratitude for exposing this corruption. We wish to make amends to the Aloran people." Thuran, who had been conferring with the village elders, stepped forward. "Perhaps it is time for both our peoples to reconsider our positions. Isolation has not served us as we intended, just as unchecked expansion has corrupted your initiative's purpose." Spencer smiled diplomatically. "The IDC would be happy to facilitate discussions between your communities." As the various groups began tentative conversations, Ricky found himself standing apart, watching this unexpected alliance forming. For years, he'd positioned himself between worlds, belonging to neither. Now, somehow, he'd become the bridge connecting them. Nara joined him, her shoulder lightly brushing his arm. "What will you do now, Ricky Pierce? Return to your solitary existence?" He looked down at Brutus, who had settled contentedly at his feet, then at Lyran, who was excitedly showing the other Aloran children how the pug's collar worked. Finally, his gaze returned to Nara, taking in her delicate green features and the intelligence that shone in her large eyes. "I'm thinking it might be time for a change," he said softly. "Turns out isolation isn't all it's cracked up to be." "The village could use someone with your skills," she suggested, a hint of shyness in her voice. "And Lyran would be devastated if Brutus moved away." "Just Lyran?" he asked, a teasing note in his voice. Nara's skin flushed a deeper shade of green. "Perhaps not only Lyran." As the sun rose fully over the horizon, bathing the spring and its gathered communities in golden light, Ricky realized that what had begun with a small alien girl curling up with his pug had somehow expanded into something much larger, a chance to build bridges instead of walls, to find connection instead of isolation. And for the first time since leaving the EDF, he felt like he was exactly where he belonged.